Hello, today is March 20th, 2019. This is the standard kubeadm call. Today is planning, or also known as Festivus. So if you have an aluminum pole and want to air your grievances, now is the time. Otherwise, we have an agenda full of things we would like to accomplish. If you can add your details to the meeting notes, that would be super helpful. I'm going to get a window here pretty soon. We can walk through the list and see where we're at. Can folks see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's walk through some of these items here. If someone wants to take notes, we might even want to dedupe this. Like there is basic themes, and we can probably bucket some of these things into specific areas. So the first one, which has been the long-standing one, Fabrizio, I moved Merrick counts and Ross lines into my list below. Not exactly certain what you mean there. We can't hear you, Fabrizio.
I think that it's my and Mark's additions to this list were moved further down.
Okay. Well, I kind of want to talk about it first. Well, at least this one. So from a priority perspective for 1.15, as we're kind of seeing with some of the issues that are coming up with CNI backporting, which I don't even understand the details. It's totally not visible to my radar of why this is even happening. That we should have KK be the canonical source of truth.
Yeah, I just set a PR to pump the CNI in the depths and RPMs, and the problem there is that we are handling Kubernetes versions inside the depths and RPM specs, which is horrible.
Yep. So from a priority perspective, I would like to not make sure that Merrick is not the sole person on this. I want somebody else to volunteer to work on this too as well, to be there to help along the way, and maybe somebody who's got some packaging experience.
My experience with packaging overall is pretty poor. If we're talking about Windows packaging, yes, but with Linux, not.
I can sync with you, Marek. Pavel speaking.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So I'd like to consider this like on the P0 list, right? So as we start to walk through this, we'll kind of identify what are the high priority items that we have to accomplish, this being one of them.
Sounds good.
All right, next up, improve CI signal for kubeadm.
There are multiple tickets here. It's kind of messy. We have overlapping tasks between the tickets. But so in one of these tickets, I tried to outline like the initial steps we have to do before we even get to testing upgrades and stuff like that, because it's not that easy. But yes, we are going to have HA tests in this cycle, in the 1.15 cycle, and also we are going to get upgrade tests and possibly HA upgrade tests even.
I would consider this either P1 or P0.5, because in order for us to actually promote HA itself, we need the test apparatus in place.
So maybe tests and docs, they apply to all the tickets, enhancements issues we have. So maybe we already have a section about HA, and it also talks about the tests.
It does, but we don't have there's two separate issues here. One is that, yes, tests, we need them for feature enhancements, but for kubeadm in particular, we have a separate test suite, and we haven't turned that online, right? And that test suite is meant to be behavioral-driven tests specific to kubeadm style deployments, because we can't put that in the standard E2E suite. We could, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw the code, the existing code, and everything that is part of the framework at this point is hard to maintain. But yes, we should enable those tests. It's basically a focus for game.
I think that, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, I think that we can rename this point as test enablement because basically we are creating the precondition for doing test, that is to have a kind ready to run the test for HA or cluster validation, or have the end-to-end test suite in place and working. And then for each feature, we'll have a test specific for the feature. Makes sense to split the priority in this way. So first we have to have test enablement. If today I want to test HA, I simply can't.
Yes, I think it makes a lot of sense to basically call this item kind slash kubeadm enablement. Yes, because that's what we have to do.
Then if we want to add something, is that we have some test related to all the features that does not exist. For me, it is a P0. This one, I agree, P0 or P0.1, but it is okay. And
who is all going to volunteer for this?
It's me. I'm already planning on this.
I will work on this and well.
I would like to get someone new involved with you two too, because the testing jiggery is a minefield, and having someone else, so that way if the leads go on vacation or go on holiday, understand the CI signal, that's going to be pretty important.
I mean, I would love to. I don't want to spread myself too thin though. So, I mean,
I want people to be realistic about how much time commitment they're going to have, right?
Yeah.
Is there any chance that I could volunteer? I do have time, but I have little to no. I have very little experience actually working with kubeadm development.
Can you please present yourself? Which company do you work for and your full name?
Yeah, I'm Jorge. I'm I'm the one that's been doing a couple of PRs with Kind. I forgot to put myself in the attending list. I work with a startup that's called Vivid Cortex.
Do you happen to also be on the release team?
Yeah, CI Signal, Shadow.
Okay. I know your nickname. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what we are going to do, I think, is that we are going to make Zoom sessions, me, Fabrizio, and you, and we should start going through the steps that we have to perform for this task.
Okay, sounds good on my end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, if I remember well, also Rafael talked about being a volunteer for working on E2E. I will ping him. It is not in the meeting today.
Yes.
Right. There's a lot of work in CI signal and testing, so I think just lumping them together seems totally fine to me. We have a bunch of issues, just coalesce them together. If we want to do some labeling to kind of group them together too for area test, that would probably be beneficial. Component standard adoption in kubeadm. I don't know what stage they're at right now. Does anyone know what state they're at?
I don't know either, but I think that it is at least we have to check with Lucas is if this cycle we have to start integrating something or not.
I don't consider this a high priority. It's like a nice to have, but not a requirement.
I don't think we'll have anything to integrate to in this cycle, at least. Probably in the next cycle, but not in this.
So I'm putting this as a P3. I don't disagree once they've actually hammered it out, but I don't want to fall on the spike either for this. I'd much rather have them walk through existing components and make sure that they've been vetted along the way. Because the problem with being first with some of these things is that we own all of the issues that come along with it, potentially, and we are now GA. So I would much rather be a reasonable follower, but not like the first person in line to eat all the bugs that are going to come along with this change.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
If you want, you can also move at the end of the list. So,
well, we can do that later on.
Okay.
Or if somebody else wants to do that while I'm walking through, that would be helpful too. All right, kubeadm enhancements. HA to beta, I definitely consider this P1. For those who are not familiar with sort of the Google-ish prioritization, P0 and P1s are your high priority targets to hit. They're pretty much non-negotiable, right? Like this is what we're going to do. Like if we're going to drop anything else, you know, those are the ones we need to hit for a given release time frame. I think this is totally blocked by the .5, right?
Yes. There are something to do, but most of it is blocked by the .5.
There were some final questions before we went to beta I did want to start to look at, but they escape me right now. There were issues with the config that we wanted to figure out. Config map blopping was obviously one. We need that for declarative support for things like cluster API. But remember how we kind of like, we agreed for the time being of how we wanted to do member addition, that was like an okay way to do it by updating the status? But I wasn't sold on the long-term effects of how we wanted to do that because we did it in a weird way, I remember. I have to look through the details again.
I remember the status meeting we had, the cluster status, but I don't remember any specific to do.
Well, we did it to enable it, so we have HA support, but I always remember the feeling of like it was a little bit dirty, what we did. I need to look through the config, and it worked, but I need to look through the config and see if that's what we want to do for the long haul. Because we're going to rev config probably this cycle. That's probably one of the lists down below. So I didn't look through Ross's doc in detail. Ross, do you want to give like the highlights reel of what's the important things, changes in config?
Well, it's actually more like incremental changes, but that's expected since we're in beta at the current config. So basically, probably the biggest change there is dropping off the cluster config from the init configuration. This is more like not a user-facing change, as it's more like internal change to kubeadm. And this is probably going to introduce some bigger changes on the API level, but the rest of the stuff is more like fixing some minor bug there and probably adding some new options that users just requested.
Do we know, given that the customized work and the config changes are this weird overlapping mesh of stuff where do we want to batch more input feedback until we've kind of evaluated how we potentially want to do customize type of integration?
I don't want to rush anything, so I don't even know if it's good to proceed with a new config version in this cycle. Probably we should wait another cycle for more feedback, but then again we have at least one bug that's causing people trouble. And
which bug is that? Just out for
it's the emit empty of taints.
That's there's a workaround for that. I know what he's saying, but I don't consider that a high priority bug. That's a consumer who's trying to automate their configuration, but have opinionated views on what A versus B should be.
There are multiple workarounds for that problem.
Exactly.
But I think that I'm adding to the PR linked by Ross all the things that I find around that can impact on config. We have a quite a long list of possible change. If there is, for instance, if we want to manage a cluster, a new variation, a new cluster variants without kubeproxy. That is a request that somehow pops out, and there are others. So I think that it makes sense to try to consolidate the list in the next week or so, and then have a review and decide what to work on. For instance, there is also the change related to HA in the config that we are postponing.
Yes, so it's kind of in a weird space because if you want to go HA to beta, we have to bump the config. And maybe we can bump to beta 2 with only the HA change, but move all the rest of the work to another cycle and gather more feedback in the process.
Let's consolidate the list in the next week or whatever, and then have a check.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, we should probably split the list in things that are achievable in this cycle in V1 beta 2 and probably some more long-term stuff that's for future config.
kubeadm as a toolbox. It's a very interesting statement. Who wrote this one?
You can blame me. So, we are doing several things to around this title. The biggest one is phases, and for phases we have some backlog, which are more. There is a list of things that we are not happy about the UX, that we have to decide if and how to address. And there is a linked document where I put all of them. For instance, I tried to explain, but the list, we have still problem on flags, too much flags, in my opinion. We have args management that is not addressed yet. We have a potential conflict between the phase name and the args value, because now phases are subcommand, and if your command, for instance, join has a arg, and if this arg overlaps with the name of a phase, you have a problem. So, and And then there is some cases where the UX is not nice. For instance, when we have conditional phases, and now we are forced to do kubeadm init, phase, upload sers, and then pass again minus minus upload sers. So it's something that, in my opinion, should be discussed and fixed.
Well, eventually, if we're in beta, I don't know if we should remove the experimental. Well, I think we should still have the experimental flag. But potentially you could have it be defaulted on versus off for the flag argument to get rid of that problem with upload certs, right?
Yes, but I think that the problem is so when we designed phases, the main driver was to basically share the same code between the top level workflow and the phases to avoid duplication, because in the past we were forced to maintain two pieces of code doing the same things.
Yep.
Now what is happening that people see the subcommand as something separated from the top level workflow, and they are starting to ask that when I call the workflow, it behaves in one way. When I call the phases individually, it should behave in a different way. So let's try an example. People is fine that when I call kubeadm init, I have to pass the minus minus upload flag. This is accepted. But they are starting to ask that when I call the upload phases directly, they want the flag to be set implicitly.
Yeah. I think we can fix stuff like that for as we go to beta, and have it defaulted.
Yes, we have to decide. We have to decide what is the boundary, what is the limit up to phases behave differently from the top level command, because this is a problem having the code behind shared between the two pieces of code. So,
well, it's a UX problem, right? And I think we should talk with Lucas and Mike Taufin about if and how they plan to address some of this stuff for other components, because we should have right now we kind of blazed a trail a little bit in having such a hierarchical subcommand structure for what we're doing. But ideally, we would have some level of tooling to support us versus us kind of doing everything on our own. And we're kind of finding warts along the way of what we've created.
okay. So
I think we should deal with it like on a case-by-case basis, honestly.
Okay, so we can put this as P2.
Yeah.
Because we would like to get it fixed.
But it's not breaking the world, right? We have a way for folks to work around things, and we can probably fix a bunch of the little UX issues, especially for things like certs.
Sorry, Tim, it is the point below. Phases UX fix or the redesign. Okay, because then we have, if we want, we can go on applying phases to the other kubeadm command. Reset should be easy. Upgrade should be hard.
The question is if it's used. I think upgrade phases does make sense. I don't know if reset phases make sense. Like, are people going to want to? I'm sure people will.
Oh yes, they want already.
There was some request, because now reset includes two operations, which is to remove a node from the cluster status and to remove the an etcd member that can be useful as a tool.
Yes, it will be.
The other consideration is that, okay, we are we can use phases to enroll new contributor because it's so.
I would say reset phases is fairly straightforward. Upgrade phases seems like it's far more thorny, especially with the HA work that will be ongoing.
The problem is that upgrade is not written in phases. It is a monolith.
Yeah.
So it is difficult to break it down.
So I'd be fine with punting on upgrade phases if we want to start to think about other things, unless we've heard feedback from the wild on upgrade phases.
I agree. We can put in P3 reset phases and work on it if there is someone that volunteers to do the works. I can support in design and in implementing and in getting the work started, but I don't want to execute on it.
Please mind that reviews also take time. In my opinion, upgrade phases, we should ideally move them to the next cycle. Upgrade phases was the item that I added to the list. I wanted to mention them, but it's a big task.
I agree. I would much rather, at least for bang for our buck for execution for experimental features, I think customize would potentially allow us to reformulate config to get us out of the business of having this weird apparatus that we currently have for config overrides. Right? Since the very beginning of the project, once we started to create a config, or even the very beginning of the project, we have so many knobs that get plumbed through all over the place. And customize gives us an exit strategy for us to potentially remove a bunch of those knobs. So I think the potential win for code maintenance and burden over time is very high there for us to be able to actually make a substantial change. I'll pause for what other people think.
I think that it is a good idea, this one.
So in Kind, we like customize is essential for patching the kubeadm config in Kind. And from what I've seen, users using Customize, like the patch schematic of Customize to modify the kubeadm config, I'm not convinced that the UX is friendly, but it's definitely going to be nice to have as a Swiss Army knife for us.
So you saw the presentation from the Googler who gave the analogous tool that's like Customize. I think we should evaluate the tooling space, because what happens with especially this area, it's not settled, right? There is no clear winner in my mind. There's a lot of ideas and solutions that exist for how to deal with partial specialization of YAML overrides given some programmatic interface, right? That's my generic way of saying this because there's so many ways to do this. People have configuration languages. In the first beginning days of the project, people just generated YAML with bash scripts and then did overrides, and then they used Python and they did it that way. Then they tried JSON it, and then people are like, yo dog, I like languages, so I created another language. And then now they're into Customize. So this problem has existed since the beginning of the project. So it's very experimental, but it has high potential ROI.
We also need to evaluate what are we going to let the users customize, like everything in the config, or
it depends. It depends on the tool, right?
But I think that in kubeadm, the use of Customize or whatever tool is not for customizing the config, but it is for customizing the artifacts that kubeadm generates. Yeah. So I want to customize the kube API server manifest. I want to customize the kube proxy manifest or the kubelet config.
Yes, then we have to make sure that this is upgradable.
Yeah, I wrote, I put together, I promised last week to put together some idea, just to, if you want to go through quickly in this presentation. And basically the background is that kubeadm, very quickly, kubeadm generates some artifacts. Some are YAML and some are not YAML, certificates and kubeconfig file, or the environment file for kubelet. Okay. Some of those artifacts, if we look at YAML artifacts, some are deployed on the local machine, so a static pod manifest, and some are applied to Kubernetes via the Kubernetes API. This is the background. If we look at how this is done, next slide, how this is done today, basically today each YAML is each phase deploy the YAML directly to the target. Static pod manifest deployed direct to the folder. Kubeadm config map is deployed directly to the API server. And there is an Eki trick to do the dry run. Okay. What we need in my proposal, I have two proposals. Is that one, we change each phase to save YAML in a folder, in a temporary folder. Then we apply, customize whatever we need, and then we apply, we deploy the customized things to the target. That can be the local disk or the Kubernetes API. And the second proposal, which is, in my opinion, the target, is that we apply the YAML only at the end. So first we go through the phases, we generate all the YAML, and then as a last step, we deploy everything. And
I need to think about this some more, because there are legitimate issues with either scenario. There's also, as Lumir pointed out, we need to almost keep the original too, because the upgrade scenario or if a person decides to modify after the fact in some way, shape, or form.
If you look at the last slide, I wrote also some notes about this, that we have to be really explicit about the contract that we give to the user around these things, because there are some resources or some YAML file that we simply must have. The kubeadm config map, without this, kubeadm cannot work. Mm-hmm. And so my idea is that, okay, when I do init, if I detect that the user is giving me some customized script, I have to give a warning. Then I have to use a notation to keep track of what is customized and what not. So when I do upgrade, I can detect that if I'm doing upgrade on a customized cluster or not, and I can decide how to behave. That is, I can ask to the user if he wants that the kubeadm try to do its job, even if we are not guaranteeing success, because we don't know basically what the user customized, or if we should do upgrade ignoring customized resources. So this is a proposal, but of course we need to think about. It's just a first brainstorming.
Yeah, we need to sit down and chat about this in detail. I do think it would be highly useful to get something out there, because almost every single release, I don't know how many issues flow in where a user doesn't understand how to specify parameters to the different components. Now, here's another thing that might be interesting for us to think about, would be if we have grand unified component config in the New World Order, do we even care? And I don't know the answer to that. Because if we have grand unified component config, we just deploy and then they update post-process. And the post-process update with component config means that the flags go away. Most of them do.
I think this is bound to the component config work in a way that if we enable customize before we get rid of the flags we pass to the API server, for instance, we then have to deploy a mechanic that determines what is higher priority, the customization or the flags that we pass as extra arguments from the config.
Well, with the grand unified component config, the idea is that should auto restart anytime it sees a modification to its configuration, and that can be done by it always uses that as the clustered stored configuration as the value that it should be using. Just exactly like we do with when we join a node to a cluster, it pulls down the configuration for that node, and then it uses that on startup. So I'm torn because I don't know where the boundary, I think it needs a lot more thought.
Yeah.
I don't know what priority folks want to give this.
Evaluate. It's just, it will, maybe that it makes sense to start writing a cap around this.
Yeah. Next up,
Windows support.
Windows support. This is pretty high on the priority list because Windows has become GA for some version of GA. Where's my camera? GA. But there's no tool other than going to Azure that actually deploys this thing. So I fully expect to get lots of inbound questions as soon as 1.14 goes out the door.
Yeah, I've been speaking with Michael, and Patrick Lang from SIG Windows, and some other people as well. Well, basically, the idea is to bring back support to kubeadm because, according to them, kubeadm worked fine on Windows at some point, but somewhere along the history of PRs and commits, we lost support for Windows simply because of the fact we don't test Windows support. And testing is also going to be a challenge, but this is something I'm going to work on in the 1.15 cycle to the point where at least I get it working, but possibly without signal. So this signal. So this means that we might support Windows, but kind of in an alpha state, something like that.
Are there other folks that want to, I know there are going to be other folks from the other SIG who are going to help join on this effort, but are there other folks on this call in particular that want to help Lubomir on the Windows front? Don't all jump up for joy right now.
I don't have a Windows machine, so it's like
I'm running a virtual machine. We're running a Windows server in a virtual machine, basically. So that's how I'm going to test it.
Okay.
I don't even know how it works with Windows. I mean, there are no C groups there, right? In the system.
Yes, the kubelet specifically is very funky on Windows. Very.
I don't think we should actually jump straight to this one simply because we don't have a test signal. So even if Lubomir and someone else actually fix it, it's going to break up pretty much immediately.
Well, we're going to need CI signal as part of this effort, right?
because if they claim to be GA, if they are going GA, they should have some test signal.
Yeah, we don't want to go there. There's a lot of magic sauce under the hood, which is basically it's a bunch of hackery inside of both the test automation that uses a weird trick in cluster up to provision Windows nodes on Azure, and it's magic. And yes, cluster up is supposed to be deprecated. We weren't supposed to add anything to it, but that's just the way it went.
So that's my proposal. We get like some sort of an alpha support in kubeadm. Don't claim that we support it, but maybe SIG Windows can help us with the provisioning of nodes, and maybe they will be interested to deploy using kubeadm at some point, so that we don't have to maintain the signal.
I think that it is fair to talk with SIG Windows and establish a kind of contract. You help me in getting the signal, I help you in fixing kubeadm.
Yes, I'm going to talk to the right people about this in the next cycle.
Okay.
Uzumir, I'm going to put all my work into the artifact generation, but if I get any time after that, I was a Windows developer 6 months ago, so.
Okay.
I have experience.
Thank you. I will have you in mind. Thanks a lot.
A lifetime ago, I was a Windows developer. I was one of those poor souls that did cross-platform work.
Oh no, that's the worst, actually.
Yeah.
It teaches you a lot about how to write portable software.
Yeah. It teaches you the angst of the Windows SDK. So we've run through the list. There's the wish list at the end here. I did want to bring up a topic for the broader group. We have a bunch of certs issues that have been kind of languishing, and we even have some things that are kind of weird. Like we don't actually have a kubelet serving cert specified by default, even though that is actually used for a direct connect through to the kubelet from the API server for only a couple of operations, exec being one of them. So if somebody does kube control exec, it needs to actually, the API server actually does a connection to the server, which is the kubelet, right? Which is a little weird thing to say, but that's what happens. So there's a bunch of other certificate issues and usability around certificates. And Liz has been on leave and probably will be on leave for a while. So I'm kind of looking for people to want to step up to know about certificates in general.
I can help you to this.
Iago?
We need to move CSR outside of being a flag in the phases.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, is the highest priority in this particular list.
In my opinion, the critical part for the user is a certificate renewal.
That one has been solved for the most part. At least cert renewal is there exists both the subcommand as well as the automation for on upgrade. So a bunch of that has been fixed a while ago, but there's a bunch of edge cases. There's so many edge cases with certificates because of how people want to set up their certificate authorities that understanding those issues and making sure that the UX is clean for those people has been troublesome. Like we tried to submit PRs to remove like the kube config change, right? That was basically a simple UX change, but that basically boiled down to having generation of some client-side certificates as well as user stuff that came along with, you know, as a sub command that we wanted to dedupe. But all of that user flow and user journey for certificates is like, I don't know, it's like a fractal path. You enter, user enters here, choose A, B, or C, and it jumps down, then fractals out to like a subtree of 1,000.
Honestly, I'm not so convinced that the story about renewal is fixed, because, for instance, people ask that how can renew certificates which are in the kubeconfig. I don't think that this is covered now, and I didn't have time to dig into the renewal stuff implemented by Liz. I tried to understand from the document which is in the website, but it is too high level for the question that people send in the chat.
So folks, currently what they are doing, somebody wrote a guide that is like, they found out that unfortunately our document is not sufficient, like for bridge switching. And somebody wrote a massive comment in one of the like the tickets with certificate stuff, and the guy explained how should you do renewal. Basically, what we have to do is now pick the changes, the suggestions from this person, and implement them in our document because our document is not sufficient. And yeah, that's something we have to do.
So, Tim, I'm interested in joining the story about certs in general and renew certificates in particular. So, yeah, I can help there as well.
Okay. I think what would help, to be honest, would be documenting user journeys. And so that, I think if we started from there and then we said, you know, you are trying to do X and you have a existing CA, this is how you go about your process. I think if we start from user journeys, it will be easier for everyone to consume and also for everyone to understand.
I also have a question because I've missed the decision on adding CSR. Was there a demand from the users for the CSR enablement? Was there a feature request about this somewhere?
I don't remember. I remember that was a last minute change PR when we were going GA, but I don't remember what was the trigger.
I think we should move it to some sort of a command, possibly.
Let's see what are the gaps from what we have now and what we need, and maybe that we have to create a kubeadm certs command.
Yep, I really think. I really think if we start from user journeys, this will all flow out, right? Talk with key high priority users. I would talk with the KubeSpray folks, for example, and I'd also talk with Seth, who's been very active. Every single time we actually submit a change, he's like the first person online to talk about the thorns and the issues that exist with certificate management.
Yes, he uses external CA. It is our beta tester.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Harris, and also there's another guy, Neil. I don't know the company he works from. They are like VIP users, pretty much.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense to have a meeting with them, collect feedbacks, and start defining user journey. Definitely.
So again, I put this as a P1.5. It's like borderline. We do need to fix these issues, but there are workarounds for a vast majority of them. But they're not, they're not pretty. What does this change the cluster? Is this that long-standing item you've had forever, Fabrizio?
Yes, I will propose it every planning. So. Yeah, no, but basically also yesterday or a few days ago, a user was asking, okay, I need to change this. How can I do it? There is no way to do it now.
So I was talking to a user today. Basically, he was having some problems, and I told him to simply edit the manifest file, and the Kubernetes will automatically pick the change and restart the server. But I guess this is not the best UX.
No, but the problem is that, okay, changing the cluster can be a huge topic. In my opinion, we have to support, to provide a decent support for 2 or 3 use cases. Changing the extra args for the config map for the component. Changing the Kubernetes settings. Maybe changing the cluster endpoint. That's it. If we manage somehow to define a story around those 3 topics, in my opinion, we are in good shape. But let's put this as P3. Someone, if there is a request of people volunteering, we have to work. Otherwise, there are already too much on the list.
Is there any effort for dynamic configuration of API server or controller manager? I thought that there was. It would, if there were dynamic configuration that is done through the API itself, wouldn't that absolve kubeadm of?
You mean the grand unified component config? The work that
I think.
Yeah. So it could absolve some of the user stories, but not, I don't think all of them.
We still have to expose a way for the user to apply a flag or something to modify this dynamically, because the configuration is uploaded to the cluster and you have to modify it in some way.
Well, we could tell that it's a post-process step. If dynamic configuration exists in perpetuity, you could basically punt and say like, do it afterwards, right? Like,
or just use kubectl.
Exactly.
I'm not sure that this is a good way, because if we let user do this, then how we can guarantee upgrades?
I think we'd have to. It's going to get really weird.
So if the kubeadm server manifest is managed by kubeadmin, changing this manifest is in scope of kubeadmin. Or otherwise we have to draw the line, but must be clear. So now we are in a weird space.
We're in a totally weird space. So like all of this evaluation of customize and grand unified component config and how to deal with changes for the cluster, they kind of all fall into a very similar bucket.
Yes.
And to be honest, it's almost in this very similar bucket to how people are dealing with changes inside of Kubernetes proper for doing variable substitution or partial specialization via programmatic, whatever.
I think that this is going to unravel in time. We just have to give it more time, and we are going to have a clearer picture of how to deal with this problem.
Yeah, I think let it percolate. Keep on thinking about it. Sometimes those background tasks when you're sleeping or whatever, which Lubomir, you need to sleep more, sometimes help, right? But I think we have more than enough here for us to keep busy for this cycle. We're nearing the end of this time, but if folks, are there any other questions, comments, complaints, concerns on?
We already talked, I guess, last week about new people new appointment for this cycle. Lubomir as a release maintainer.
Yes, he should be already, right?
Milestone maintainer.
Milestone maintainer, sorry.
No, I'm not. Fabrizio, I was going to ask you, can you edit, as a milestone maintainer, can you edit the original posts, the descriptions of PRs? This is something I wanted to do.
We will chat offline. I will do it.
Okay.
I think that now it is managed by APR in Kubernetes orgs, but I have to check. And I think that we can also, if people agree, I want to propose also to have Ross as a approver.
+1 for me.
And Rafael as a reviewer. I don't know if it is already a reviewer.
No, also +1 for me for Rafael.
I'm a member of the org, but not a reviewer.
If everyone agree, I will send a PR.
I agree. If you dissent, please let us know now. Usually the way you're supposed to do it is in chat. Please let us know. Otherwise, do a +1 in chat, and we'll do a quick timeout. All right, last count of 3. Speak now or forever hold your peace with regards to vote for promotion. 1, 2, 3. All right, what's up, Daniel?
Yeah, a quick small wish for me for the API. So the kubeadm API. There are some fields. So for the kubeadm API is or the type is being marshaled now by more tooling. For example, the cluster API provider AWS takes uses the type and then marshals it out to a config YAML. And when it does so, or when any other tooling does so, there are fields that have 0 values that are not omitted. And so you have you have all these fields that are output and they have 0 values. And then when the config is read by kubeadm, those values are essentially ignored and replaced by some default. But I find it somewhat confusing to somebody that's looking at the config, seeing these fields, and it's not clear whether those are whether that 0 means that it's like a 0 value and has no meaning, and that's been replaced by default, or whether that's an actual value that is being passed in.
So you joined the party a little late, Daniel. We actually did talk about this.
Thanks.
So we are aware. We put it as a P 1.5 to evaluate what config changes we want to make in this cycle and which ones we don't want to make, or which ones we can punt. You've been pretty adamant about the teens one, so let's add it to the.
Yeah, that's like the converse, right? That I was trying to remove the omit empty. So this is adding omit empty, and anyway, I'll look at that. I've seen that doc before. I'll look at it. Thanks.
Yeah. So we've prioritized. We have a fair number of things that fall underneath the 2 category. Those are the things that we should try really hard to deliver on, and if we need to, we can try to, like, as a SIG or as a sub project, try to shuffle folks appropriately to get energy and effort directed towards anything that falls below P2. P2 is be like, if we have got time and your employer whatever, then go for P2s. But when we start to do planning for how we want to do PR for a cycle, usually the PR goes around these major features. With that in mind, we're at time now, but I want folks to think about whether or not we want to do any PR, especially around HA, or I don't know if we're doing packaging PR. That doesn't really, like, yay, doesn't suck as much. But the HA work would be, I think, for promotion to beta, I think would be a good whiz bang for the broader community.
It's a bunch of Google people to fix the 114 branch because it's currently broken, and they immediately sent a fix. So now we can cherry pick stuff for 114.
Okay. All right, we're at time, so we should stop it now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.